Hey, Nick Larvier here. Welcome to the Don't Suck at Video podcast. I'm a filmmaker, video producer, and a DP. I like to help filmmakers tell stories and help businesses grow using video marketing. Some of my favorite movies are Blade Runner, Mad Max, Indiana Jones, and The Last Crusade. To introduce my guest today, my guest is Sean Campbell. He's a freelance independent journalist of 13 years. He's worked with Vice, PBS. His work's been featured in multiple documentaries, every major news network, and he's gone to many places around the world. And he loves to work on documentaries in particular.
And I now actually am no longer freelance. I work for KTV Channel 7 in Omaha. I have left the state of Arizona, moved 1,500 miles away. So I'm no longer freelance. I'm in corporate news.
Okay, icebreaker question. What are a couple of your favorite movies or shows?
So my favorite movie of all time is a throwback. Let's see if anybody knows this. Is called Gotcha. It's from the 80s. It's a spy movie, and then Robot Jocks. Those are literally my two favorite movies of all time, both from the 80s, I believe, unless like Gotcha came out in the early 90s, but I'm pretty sure they're both from the 80s. Love Footloose as well. I watched it the other day just for giggles. Yeah, man, I really love like cheesy old stuff. Like Robot Jocks is... Nah, man, like Robot Jocks is like my generation's Pacific Rim, but it's so cheesy. It's so cheesy, and I love it. And Gotcha is a movie about where they're playing like this spy paintball game on college campuses, and then it turns into an actual like espionage movie from like the 80s, and he like falls in love with this like foreign woman who comes over, and like it's such an original story though, and it's so silly, and like nobody's ever done anything like that I've seen anyways, like just growing up. But I don't know, I fell in love with that movie as a kid, and and then I fell in love with the obvious, like the Hitchcocks, and was always a big fan of like old documentaries, and Casablanca, and the classic as well. But those are my two favorites.
Nice. So you've had an interesting career. You've kind of, as you told me, sort of fell into this career, and you've had a winding path. And I think a lot of people, when they're starting off, whether it's filmmaking or freelance video and photojournalism, like anything in media, there's so many different little branching paths, and a lot of them can kind of tickle the same, interests. Like a lot of them touch each other, and so it can be hard to figure out where to start or what to do or how to get your foot in the door. It's not like, oh, I want to be a programmer. Well, there's a clear like, oh, here's the 3 steps. You do this, and then you do this, and then you get to your destination. And media is not like that. So I thought that you could provide some valuable insight as far as that goes to anybody who's starting out. Maybe you could just start off by talking about how you got into this whole thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in, I was in love with not in love, but I grew up watching the Wolf Blitzers and Anderson Coopers and Martha Gellert. I didn't grow up watching Martha Gellert, but just knowing who some of the greatest like war correspondents are of our time, and they intrigue me, especially as like the 24/7 news cycle continued to evolve and get to where we are. And it kind of just fell in my lap. Straight out of film school, I'd done some projects. So like I was on vacation in Egypt with my ex. In 2011, there were some other foreigners. Actually, one guy made a full documentary, but this was during the revolution, the coup d'etat in Egypt in 2011. I literally told my ex at the time, "Hey, I'm going to need you to get on a flight with everyone else and leave, and I'm just going to document. I'm just going to document the revolution. She thought it was crazy, and obviously it didn't work out because I am crazy. But it was just
on the one hand, that's wild that so you were literally there for vacation, and then this whole thing popped off. But so on the one hand, it's a dangerous, just ever changing situation. But on the other hand, it's an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, and I just got like one of those old school Sony dad handy cams with him on vacation. Nothing special, man. I mean, not even a Betamax, bro. Like, just
Have you gone to film school before that? So you were already
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was already out of film school. I went to the Art Institute of Phoenix. Everybody knows. Hopefully, everybody's read up on the scandal there. But yeah, with the Art Institute in general, yeah. So I unfortunately went to the Art Institute, and I just didn't get what I wanted out of it. It was it was very difficult when I was on sets. And I just wasn't enjoying myself. And so I ended up, even though like I would do some freelance work on the side, I was basically right back to like corporate finance. And then 2011 happened. And like I said, I told her to jump on a plane. I went and covered the revolution for Egypt. And one of many. I mean, there was several foreigners there that did it. I believe one guy actually made a full documentary out of his work. If I had it, I would give it to you guys, or I could find it later. Maybe Nick and I can throw it in the description. But yeah, and then I ended up actually some of my footage it got picked up by some documentaries, and it was hard to find stuff back then. It's not like you could like go on Twitter or and stuff like that. So it was a little more difficult to find.
And then in terms of like now, lots of people have fairly high quality camera or video capabilities in their pocket, and they can capture stuff more easily. But in 2011, that wasn't the case. I mean, some people had some stuff, but it also wasn't nearly as good. So. Yeah.
No, you were there were some phone calls made, and like you're on message boards and IRC and matter of fact, we still had BBSs that were still available. I can't remember if MySpace was still around, to be honest with you. I think there's like the rise.
It wasn't popular anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, Facebook, I think the rise. I think Twitch was rising. Facebook was definitely around, and that might have been how they found me. I was making phone calls to networks I knew.
So you started off with this trip in Egypt and covering that, and so after that, so you were working corporate finance, right? And then you continued to do the journalism on the side. So what was... You obviously had an interest and a passion for that still, despite what you were doing for your job. So, like, what was your goal during that time? What were you trying to accomplish? Were you trying to get into it full time, or were you just like, hey, I'll pursue this when I have time on the side?
Back then, I didn't really know what I wanted. I didn't really know. I was still very conflicted between filmmaking and journalism. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even say that like 2011 between like 2016 and 2017. I don't know that I really understood journalism like I do today. Even going to the places that I've been, especially because, besides picking up a camera in 2011, there was stuff that followed after that where, I'm just a camera operator freelancing for, places like Vice and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I wasn't really doing any of the things that I've done in the last few years, but it was always piqued my interest. The big thing was bouncing between, my daily job, which paid very well, but it was miserable from the time I was like 20 years old, and I'm going on 42 now. Right. So, it got worse and worse. And then, and then after COVID, and we can get into that, not COVID specifically, just how things have changed and it just kind of made it more miserable. But I was essentially like, I don't know if it's just because maybe the Art Institute didn't train us very well, and they didn't. But going on sets, I felt very odd. I just felt like an outcast, whether I was a PA or an AC, or even working on a couple of small projects where I actually was the DP or the cinematographer. I just never really felt like I fit in. It just
Okay.
it didn't matter. Like, even if I understood the story, and at first, if it would be like I would be super interested. And then, as the projects went on, I never really felt like I belonged any more than I felt in corporate finance, right? Like I never felt at home.
Do you feel differently now that you're doing what you're doing, or do you think you can identify now and with hindsight, like why it was that way for you then?
So I've been out here for, not quite a month, going on a month, and I wake up for the first time in my life that I've ever worked every single day, and I love my job. I mean, I was sick this entire week. I got leaks in my apartment that I rented out here. I sprained my ankle on the job, and I'm still rocking and rolling, man. I don't make the money. Yeah, man. I don't make the money that I was obviously making in corporate finance, but I've learned that, through trial and error in life and stuff like that, like, you work in those industries, and not necessarily filmmaking for those out there that are watching specifically, or filmmaking, but if you're trying to balance something like IT or finance or something like that, and because you're struggling to, whether it's getting to filmmaking or deciding that you want to take an alternative path like I did, which is to get into journalism, and we will talk about how to do that, is that just know that, like, you don't have to give up, and money at some point, at least for me, I've realized as I've gotten older, yes, we need it to survive, but I have a budget, especially, I don't know if working in finance has helped me do that, but I have a budget set. I kind of stick to it. And that's that. Like, I don't, all those lavish vacations you think you're going to take because you watch social media influencers online and stuff like that, those companies, most of the time, they won't let you take them when you want to take them, right? Like, you want to take them like this date. Nah, they want you to take them in February when it's cold, because
I've experienced
this is when it makes some money.
Too.
Yeah.
With, that's the thing is, if you're not, pretty much anywhere you go, if you're part of a team, whether that's, the military, like it was for me, or for a corporate job, like, they're going to put demands on your time and your availability. Like, they're going to, it's kind of a give and take, and you have to decide how much flexibility do you want. And if you're freelance, you do get a lot of flexibility. The trade-off is there's uncertainty, and now you have to market yourself. You have to find those opportunities, which and like, we can talk more about that. But the lavish vacations. I mean, the thing is, I think that, like you said, you need money to survive. Obviously, it's good to have a budget and be disciplined and stick to it, because I think it gives you more freedom. Because if you're deciding how you want to spend the money, it's not just getting spent. But then I would rather make a little bit less money, but do something I enjoy more every day. Because if you're working 40 to 60 hours, maybe more per week, that's a lot of your life. So what are you investing your time into every day?
That could be your life. That could be like your entire life. And so it's not just like it could be part of your life. It could literally be 20, 40, 60. It could be literally like,
it could be
everything that you do until you die. And then you're sitting around saying, oh, well, I put X amount of dollars into my 401k. Cool. Well, what other investments did you put into? Which, unfortunately, a lot of filmmakers don't know, and I hope one day you can get that's a bigger topic, which we are not getting into, people.
Dealing with finance, personal
But if you
finance.
are, but if you are an independent filmmaker or journalist or something of that nature, I do recommend that you either learn yourself or see a financial specialist, because if you work for yourself, you do need to be putting money away. But yeah, so like you're working for a machine, which there's nothing wrong with that. I technically work for a machine right now. The difference is that I'm content with the machine that I work for. It's just a different environment. I'm just very happy where I'm at. I'm happy making less money. I don't wake up miserable every day, and I've never, besides, the obvious, which would be on those freelance gigs, whether it was, using my vacation to go overseas or whatever the case may be, right? Or covering some of the most dangerous riots that we've seen in the last 8 years, and or since the 70s, and so on and so forth. So, essentially, I felt most comfortable even in my 30s. And even now, like, I feel pretty comfortable for whatever reason, like being in danger. I don't know why, why that. I'm just a journal, kind of a journaling junkie, but yeah. So like, you just have to, like, find that niche and what makes you happy, because sitting around and essentially just existing, right, is no way to live. And I don't say that to be like, hey, quit your job tomorrow. Don't do that.
Sure.
Just find a path.
Yeah.
And
Here's a question. I mean, how do you think someone can find that path? My quick opinion is try a lot of different things. Don't like poo-poo one particular thing. Just try a lot of different things if you're not sure what you like. Like, I never imagined that I would love doing cinematography. The first 3 years, I started doing filmmaking with my brother. We started a business together. I didn't touch the camera. I didn't touch the Adobe software. I just did the other stuff. But once I got my hands on a camera and I started doing it more and more, it turns out I really love it. But so you just don't know. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
So now there's obviously more options for younger people coming in, right? Like, you've got people like you who are always willing to reach out and help young people and say, hey, if you want to try this out, whether it be, you can test my equipment, as long as you're obviously probably around if you're new. Do PA stuff, and you're always willing to bring, like, new people on, right? And you're not the only person. So for, like, Arizona folks who I think are mostly going to be watching this, reach out to people in the groups. Put yourself out there. Put your work out there. It doesn't matter if it's bad, because you're going to get better, and you're going to get good criticism from really good folks, especially in the Arizona filmmakers community. And if you're like me and you choose a different path, which is why we're here, as far as, like, journalism is concerned, put your work out there online and let it speak for itself. My biggest advice and some mistakes that I made along my own career paths is, there were times and I thought that I had to do, like, opinionist stuff or columnist stuff, things that I didn't even necessarily know the names of, and put my politics out there and stuff like that. I recommend that if you're going to follow the path of maybe trying to be a photojournalist and things of that nature, although there are successful photojournalists that are capable of being opinionated, they're at a certain level where they can do that, and nobody can stop them. If you're not at their level, my personal recommendation is don't let anybody know what your politics are. And personally speaking, as a journalist, I tend to read or follow people who don't include their opinions in their work. I think that your work should speak for itself. I want, just like film, just like
Present
filmmaking.
information.
I want the person seeing my work just like I would make a movie. I want them to come out thinking. And it really
Right.
like that's why I kind of like thrillers and stuff now and stuff like that. M. Night Shyamalan's always been good at that, regardless of what people say. Like, right, you come out completely confused, but like I don't want you to be confused, but like I want you to
Yeah.
come to your own conclusion of what it means.
Right.
I don't want to tell you
it's
what it
like,
means.
It's like watching a director's commentary or a video, the director explaining what everything in his movie means, and then you go watch the movie, and it's like, well, now all
Doing it
your
backwards.
thoughts about the movie are colored by what they said about it. Instead, let's just watch the film and just let me think about it and come to my own conclusions. Yeah.
So sometimes in local news, though, so like in local news, when there's this, we will tell you what's going on, right? There's like if we're just covering an accident, let's say, right? Like or
Yeah.
today, as a matter of fact, yesterday, we went to cover something we thought was going to be a traffic jam. It turned out to a graduation. So then we were trying to tell the people that were going to come later that day, which routes to take and stuff like that, local news and stuff like that. So it ended up basically OPD, which would be the Omaha Police Department. They just had the whole thing under control. It was, so the story changed when we got there, right? So in those cases, you are telling the audience, like, hey, it's pretty good. You can even show up late. You can basically show up late. The safety people and OPD have everything under control. There's plenty of parking. You're good to go. Come out, have fun, enjoy your kid or your grandson or niece, whatever, graduation, and it'll be a great time. Just a very heartwarming story. So these are the type of stories now that I'm doing that aren't necessarily these stories when they see like everybody's on social media. They think of because I'm a former frontline journalist. And now everybody's like, oh, you're covering like weather and accidents and even heartwarming stories. I would even say heartbreaking because I covered a story the other day where 20 something people essentially have lost everything because of flooding. Dang. So and those are important. Those are just as far as I'm concerned, those are just as important as any work that I've ever done in my entire life, if not maybe more, because I think it's important to get that message out there, because that then helps those folks recover from this very just tragic thing that's going on in their life. And I realize, and we'll talk a little bit, before this ends, obviously, about where I've been and stuff like that. But those stories are about documenting history, right? So most of my career has been documenting history. Now I'm telling stories, human stories that are local, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. I never thought of it that way as basically capturing history, but that's true. That's what you're doing. And even on the local level, I mean, that stuff maybe doesn't matter to someone across the country, but it matters to somebody else in town, Wanted to ask you, so when you were working in finance, how did you juggle working that and doing the freelance stuff on the side? Because a lot of people are in that situation and maybe they're not sure, but maybe they want to make a transition to doing whatever they want to do full time. And maybe they feel stuck, or they might even be content with doing it on the side, which is also totally fine. But how did you deal with that situation?
Yeah, so it's essentially, you're basically putting in more hours. You're taking your weekends, and then you're prioritizing gigs when they come along, especially now. Yeah. With the use of the groups and things of that nature, utilize those. And if you're serious about it, you might have to skip a couple years of vacations and use your vacation time to spend on these projects. But to be fair, a lot of these projects, especially the indies and stuff like that people are doing in Arizona, they're typically at least some of the times they'll work around you, right? Like even if you can't come out every single day, they'll be like, oh yeah, cool, you can come out for like 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, because those are your days off, and they'll take you on as a PA, and or maybe somebody like you can get them connected if they're interested in cinematography, get them connected with the cinematographer or DOP, or depending on what type of project is and what the budget is, whether or not they even have a DOP. Yeah. Maybe you could be a first or second AC as well. I always recommend to everyone, and you probably do as well, kind of start off as a PA. That's pretty standard in the industry. Yeah, because PAs can
and see how it is.
Yeah, and then because like PAs can end up kind of like, yeah, you might not, but I mean PAs like essentially they do way more than they don't get paid enough. I'll just say that. And PAs actually really good PAs, like really good ones, they do a lot. They do way more than they should actually. So
probably,
you know, like I could think of some names in Arizona that people that bounce around and kind of have done it all. I think that you should do that maybe when you start off, but I do think that like at some point you have to find your niche, because I think that like whether you choose to take unconventional paths or even if you just choose to be a filmmaker, you have to find that one thing and then that second thing to lean on that you're just really good at. There's a difference between being like mediocre or like good at like 10 things, and that's fine. Like, hey, I can be a gaffer, I can do lighting, I can do something, I can work a camera. Okay, well, you can work a camera, but can you work a camera? Can you actually pull focus? Can you tell me the difference between why I'm using this specific lens for this moment and why I'm setting up a shot for this moment? Oh, I can direct, but can you really direct?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's helpful to try a little bit of everything at first. I think it's good to be well-rounded in general as a person and in whatever your craft is. But I think there is a point you reach where in order to become known and proliferate your name as, hey, this person does this thing, you have to become excellent at it, excellent enough where people begin to recommend you. You have to also market yourself and stuff. We should talk about that next, but like you have to get good enough. And then if you're really going to rise above the crowd, you have to become really, really good at that one thing to where it's just a no-brainer when someone's like, hey, we need a person that specializes in this. Oh, great! I got the guy for you.
So I tried to make this documentary in 2019 called Crossroads, and I have put out clips and stuff like that once I kind of like got the rights back to it and everything after COVID. But like it was so hard to make. It was because I was the director, I was the cinematographer, I was the editor, I thought I had producers, but I really didn't. I was everything. I wore too many hats, and I like literally sold all my Lumix gear, bought like the Black Magic when it came out, you know what I'm saying? And then I started investing in like Canon gear and stuff like that, which paid off as far as the Canon stuff, not so much the Black. Who cares about camera stuff? But it was so like it's like one of those things where it was an experience, but I realized in that moment that like I started to like hate the process, like every process, and I wasn't sure which process I hated because I was doing them all.
Overwhelming. It becomes painful because it's very overwhelming, and the less resources you have or the less help you have and the more hats you're wearing, it becomes a great burden. That's how it feels. Like even if you're really excited about it, it is just so much work. And I'm sure that's what you experience.
But at the same time, like when I've gone out, like when I was out on the border, this last year before I came here to Omaha, I was out on the border for 2.5 months, living on my own in a trailer, 5-wheel trailer, doing my own editing, submitting my own packages to news companies, 8 to 12 hour days. I had no issue with that because it's a different, it's a different environment than trying to make a movie. I wasn't trying to make a movie, and I have content that is now going to, that has been licensed to several documentaries. So while I didn't necessarily make national news, I did have some viral videos, whether through theft or whatever, good old X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it.
Not nice.
But yeah, but I've been lucky enough to some of my work now is getting picked up and it'll be seen. And then I have
that's great.
I went into Mexico for a company and stuff like that, and I did some stuff that people will see. Hopefully by the end of the summer. I can't say much because of NDAs right now. But yeah, I went into Mexico, and there's some exciting stuff coming out this summer.
So my question is, if someone is, I think there is some crossover between if someone wants to work crew or whatever on film stuff and the freelance journalism, in that you're in business for yourself. And so if you're trying to get started in freelance journalism, how do you get your foot in the door? Like, where does someone even begin? Because there's an aspect of marketing yourself and connecting with people. So I just thought you could touch on that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of luck involved, like anything. Right now is the best time because people have social media, right? So if you're interested as far as like being a photojournalist, whether it's like strictly photography, the terms kind of like overlap. It's like a news photographer, photojournalist. Anyways, if you're interested in general in like especially pursuing the avenue that I fell in love with, put it out, especially on X. Twitter, as lousy as a platform it is. Put it out on Instagram. I'm not personally into TikTok, but TikTok is still a great platform. Put it out on every social media platform that you can, including even YouTube. I will tell you, like a lot of journalism, especially independent journalists, we get demonetized on YouTube. So if journalism is the path that you choose to pursue as an independent journalist, I will tell you that like you're not going to necessarily make dollars off of no matter how much you build. Views. Yeah.
Right.
You
but
could get like
reach out
you
to
can,
right?
but yes. So that's the point, right? You want your stuff to be seen. Now, most journalists are looking for your stuff on X, Twitter still. As lousy as a platform it is, if you put it out on X and Twitter, that's where they're looking for your stuff. Or also just start reaching out to networks. Now, if you're in a smaller market, they honestly might not have the budget and they might not ever buy anything. However, what I would say is that when you first start, you're probably going to have to give away a couple packages. And when I say packages, that's just could be a photo, a video, whatever the case may be. But get those contacts. Start building just a list of like reporters and journalists and producers and stuff like that you can just call up. And then at some point, once you get to a certain level, and Phoenix is a bigger market, so it's not the same here, but once you start like getting those names and stuff like that, especially if you're like that person and you're there before everyone else, or let's say like, for instance, when I covered Israel, Palestine, there would be like 12 photographers, but I was the only videographer. One videographer, like 12 plus news photographers.
Well, photography,
we call them the same thing.
I probably piss some people off saying this, but I think photography is easier in a lot of ways. So, like, I mean,
I didn't get into I did photography in high school. I have all my dad's vintage cameras and stuff, or my grandfather's. And then I kind of just quit. I never got right back into it. I was always like, oh, everybody's a photographer, so I'm going to become a videographer. So COVID basically was like, I bought a 5D Mark II, and then I bought a 6D, and then I was like just shooting because I didn't have anything to do with shooting stuff. I think that like here's what I'll say. I think that it's easier for videographers to jump into photography and get really good, especially cinematographers. And I think photographers struggle to get into videography or become cinematographers because
some extra layers to it.
There's a many layers, right? Storytelling. It's more than like just, hitting the record button. And I think that like they don't, it's just difficult for some photographers, not all, but some photographers struggle to wrap their head around the fact that like, hey, it's more than just like setting up a scene. Like we're
it's
natural.
Be moving actively.
The best
subjects that you're recording are not going to be where you want them to be. They're going to be continually moving, turning around.
Yeah,
all sorts of stuff.
And the best cinematographers we don't use autofocus. So yeah.
Right. I do love some autofocus though.
No, it has its moments, and it's going to be like I have it on my cameras. It's going to be great for so many things, but there's I think that
you
like
just need to go to manual. So
the
equipment you're using.
I think in journalism especially, it has helped me out a ton, like on the border and stuff like that, being able to like, especially at night and things like that, where I really can't see everything. And I'm working with like a 104, like a 24 or 105 f4 at night with a light on my camera. And there's like a custom built rig that's right here. This is actually what I built. This is what I used on the border.
Nice.
So I recorded because the R5C broke. The R5C broke. I still have the camera body. I got to fix it. So I used my R6 actually. All my stuff came from a Canon R6, which we all know overheats. So I used the Ninja 5 to record RAW. No overheating problems because I had so many issues, never with photography, but obviously I had issues with this when I was covering our Roe v. Wade. It overheated several times, and on commercial shoots, and like I would pair it with like the C70. It overheated so many times. It was just but it's a good camera. It really is, especially when you pair it with the Ninja 5. It sucks that you have to spend extra money, but yeah, and I do use V-mount batteries. But yeah, I built a full like mini rig, which is a run and gun rig, and I mean. I think that like, I would say that like, and I think that plenty of border journalists would agree. And I'm very blessed to have learned from some of the best border journalists out there, especially not just the most watched because they're the most watched, but they're also the most knowledgeable. I think that they would tell you that I obviously out there, especially in Tucson, where people were leaving. A lot of people were going to Texas and then California. I think a lot of them would say that I was one of the best like camera operators and journalists that just really spent time understanding the subject matter, and especially from a guy who only went to film school. So yeah,
right. So it sounds like if you want to get into freelance journalism, video, photo journalism, you got to put yourself out. You got to put your work out there, because otherwise people aren't going to know that you're doing it and be able to see what kind of stuff that you're covering. And potentially if it's relevant and timely and they think it's good enough, they won't be able to even ask you to license it if they don't see you out there sharing. So you have to create visibility for yourself, it sounds like. And
now, just to stop you real quick too,
Sure.
If you are young though, technically speaking, like if you're like, hey, I don't want to be a reporter, but I want to be a news photographer.
Yeah.
You could technically build a reel and just start submitting it to companies. If you're younger, you're more likely to possibly be picked up quicker, depending on the market that you're in.
Why is that?
I mean, that's every industry. Yeah, that's I got gray hair. I got gray hairs coming in. I think that's just it's kind of every industry where we're at. I would even say that like, if you're like, hey, I'm into cameras, I want to do my own stuff. I'm into investigative journalism as well. I'm watching this podcast. As much as I love filmmaking, I just like you, Sean, I really love this aspect of like this blend of telling stories, but I'm not quite interested in making movies.
Yeah.
Maybe journalism school is an option for you, or communications. And then when you can intern and come out, and then you don't have to just be a reporter. They have these things called multimedia journalists now, which are essentially people who do everything. They do their own editing, they do their own shooting, they do their own reporting. Yeah. It's kind of a new thing, and it's starting to make waves across the news industry. I am planning. That's where I'm planning to basically transition into, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, and so I can get back to reporting and stuff like that. And so you end up essentially doing it all. So you don't rely on people like me. You don't need a news photographer with you. You don't need me to edit your package. You do it all. And
so being able to develop those skills in each of those areas and kind of like be able to show that you can do it, that can be beneficial.
Yeah, and taking
where things are going.
Like for me, it was a very long path. I mean, it took me 20 something years to get here. And not necessarily to ever do something important. So we haven't necessarily talked about that, but I've been to the Middle East 3 times. I've covered just about every major riot there's been in the United States since 2018. I left news after Tyree Nichols last year, and I took a break and I started working with bands and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I came back to the United States essentially after Iraq in 2017. And then I kind of sat around for a bit. I had a little bit of money, and I just kind of sat here and watched the world burn. And I decided to just go out there and try my hand at basically being. I figured, hey, if I can go do this, I can certainly do this dangerous thing, right, in my own country. And I will say that, like, honestly, I felt way more comfortable in Iraq and Syria than I felt in like Portland or the George Floyd riots, or because at least as a camera operator in Iraq and Syria, like, I know who the enemy is. I can also, like, between translators and everything else, like, you start to learn. You're in the military, so you can kind of understand this. You understand, like,
cultural things. They explain to you.
I'm learning cultural, but I'm also learning the difference between a whiz and like munitions flying. So like even like when mortars were coming, I was learning like how far away they were and why I didn't need to worry and stuff like that. Yeah. So I was learning things that taught me to, and plus I'd been through like hostage. I went through the whole like hostage training program if you were kidnapped as a foreign correspondent and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
I don't know whether or not that would ever really help you, but you should go through. You should go through it.
Maybe.
Yeah, if you're going to go into Ukraine right now or something like that, you should go through the training program. It teaches you how to essentially, calm down and what you should do. And, again, I've never been captured, so I don't know whether or not it would actually do anything, but you should always take any training that's out there.
Yeah. It's wise to be prepared. If nothing else, you're mentally preparing yourself. If something does happen, you're not just.
And I'll say that, like, people watch this stuff, right? Like whether it's frontline journalism or war correspondence, and as somebody who grew up watching war correspondence and then decided to go into a war zone as a camera operator, you have to know, especially if you're going to go into a war zone, at least if you go into as a frontline journalist, you can turn around, get in your car and leave. Okay. Before the tear gas hits, before you take your first, foam bullet to your chest or whatever the case may be, even if you're wearing body armor.
That does not sound fun.
Like, the bottom line is that, and I don't know where you've been in your specific role, but when you make that decision to, I would imagine soldiers maybe in their head are going through the same thing. That you really have to know, like, am I built for this? Because there's no turning back once you get on that flight. I mean, there is, but like you've really made a commitment, and the minute that you touch down, and the minute that like you're embedded with, whether it's rebels or the Iraqi military or whatever the case may be, like you've made a commitment. Yeah, you're in for the ride, and like you have to like figure it out as you go along, and you have to learn, and you have to listen, because especially if you're not a soldier.
Yeah,
you're not a soldier, I mean, some people are, by the way. Plenty of soldiers become journalists, but if you're not a soldier, listen to the people who are giving you advice to protect you, and it'll make you a better, camera operator out there doing the things and bringing those stories to the people to show them what's going on the battlefield. It is important, and somebody has to do it, but you have to know whether or not you're built for it. And that's I mean, it's so hard to explain to people outside of you just know. And if you literally can't look yourself in the mirror and say, I can do that. Oh, I can do that.
I can put myself in danger. Yeah.
Yes. If you have any doubt in your mind, even an inkling of a doubt in your mind, you're not built for it, and you can't do it. Or you definitely shouldn't.
Strong statement. Well,
I'm sorry, but you like you just it's I don't care if it hurts your feelings or anybody's feelings out there. The bottom line is that like you're putting other people at risk. Whether that be your crew, whether that be the people you're embedded with, or even on the front lines, just being a frontline journalist. Let's say you're in New York right now covering the riots or whatever the case may be. You're putting people at risk by not understanding, your own limitations. Everybody has their limitations, and we're all different. It doesn't mean that like, just because like I'm built the way I'm built, it doesn't make you bad or anything like that. It just makes us different, is what I'm trying to say. And by no means I'm trying to insult anybody out there, but you have to know how you're built, and you have to know if you're ready for it.
Of course, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
I'm not suited to direct. Like, I'm a terrible director.
Well, I'll take your word for it.
I'm not a good director, man. I'm just not. Like, I don't, not even second, man. Like, I don't like dishing out all the commands, and I'm just not good at it. It's not my thing. It's not my thing.
No problem.
No.
Yeah.
And before we end, remember, I have that question for you. So I want to know, as a successful filmmaker, why you're still in the reverses. No, I mean, I believe your company's doing well. I think your company's doing well. You're well liked in the Arizona filmmaking community. So why have you remained in
the National Guard
military?
Yeah,
National Guard.
Yeah. So, I'm in Poland right now. So my unit got called up, and we got sent here to Poland. So normally I just train 1 week in a month. I have been in for 10 years now, and for 4 of those, I worked full time. So basically like active duty, regular Army. It's different technically, but I won't get into it. But and then in September 2021, in September 2021, I left that job, and I got to a point where I had built things up enough, and I had learned some important lessons to where I think, okay, I can make it. I can make the transition to full time now. So why I'm still doing this? Partially, it's because I love the people that I'm working with. I've worked with National Guard is different than active duty, and that active duty, you tend to move from place to place every 2 to 3 years. So you're working with different people. You don't really build like deep roots in one place. But in the National Guard,
depends on the branch.
It depends. Yeah, for Army, it seems like they just move around a lot, and there's a lot of Army bases. So but yeah, so for me though, being like in the same office, working with the same people for 10 years, like people that have mentored me, that I've grown to appreciate a lot. That has a lot to do with it. And now I'm in a position of leadership where I have other people coming up beneath me and I have opportunity to mentor them as well. And so it's kind of like this legacy thing. I want to stick around, like I want to be part of it. So that's definitely part. Another part is the benefits. Like frankly, the healthcare is dirt cheap. It's like for a single guy, it's like $35 a month for TRICARE Reserve Select. So that's.
Will you marry me, Nick? Yeah. I'm straight, but I will totally marry you for the benefits.
Get it on paper. We can both get TRICARE. Yeah. But so there's that, the benefits. And then I do learn, like I get professional experience out of it. I get different experiences than I would in my normal.
It's obviously transferred over.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have a lot that I owe to my military experience. So, and then making the money, not so much. I mean, I make a few $100 extra a month, which is nice, but it's not that big of a deal. Obviously, I joined the military for a reason, like I wanted to serve, and so that still is part of it. But I would say just being part of the little community that I'm in, and the people that I care about and want, like I can mentor. Yeah.
So my network just went down to the border to cover the Nebraska National Guard because they're down in Texas right now, and I'm new, so I didn't get to go. But some people were asking me. There was like, oh, Now, by the way, Nebraskans and Iowans and stuff like that, they loved it, right? Like, and I loved it personally. I thought they did great. Like, amazing stuff. They just covered the guys and like what they're doing over there, why they're there, why the state of Texas has them there. They're not really seeing people come through. They're a deterrent. They don't. And by the way, the National Guard doesn't have any authority over like anybody coming through. Anyways, they can like tell them, hey, please stop, and then they call Border Patrol. So like. But they're not, where they're at. They're not seeing anybody. They're just telling the human stories of like these guys, why they signed up to the National Guard, why they're out there in Texas, why they're doing what they're doing. So kind of the same thing. And yeah, I mean, you're like, Nebraskans and, Iowans and anybody basically watch KTV7 is like getting to like learn the stories of these, young men and women and why they're over there in Texas and why they signed up in the first place and why they also signed up to go. Cause apparently like, there was a list. Not everybody had to go.
All right. Thanks Sean for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time. And it was nice talking to you.
Always a pleasure, Nick, and be safe in Poland.
Thank you. Bye.